Welcome back. My name is Deva Leela, and this is Nayaswami Devarshi. We'll be carrying on discussing more this beautiful and inspiring book, Kriya Yoga, Spiritual Awakening for the New Age. Devarshi, what is meant when it's said the art and the science of Kriya Yoga? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a very important question to really understanding how to gain results from a practice, any spiritual practice, but a practice like Kriya Yoga. Sometimes people think it's all just about techniques, and it's not just about techniques. It's not mechanical in the way that we do these things. The Kriya technique itself works with the physical breath, but it also works with devotion. It works with, as we were talking about, transmuting human feeling into divine feeling, working with just the inner life force, and it works with intuition and more of an intuitive awareness of these energies. So it's not just technique, it's both science and it's art. Now, you can, and I'll use an example, and Swami Kriyananda uses this analogy very often talking about Kriya Yoga, that many people go to art school and they learn all the techniques of art, how to use the brush, how to work with color, the science of color, and how to do all these things. But not many people come out of art school who become brilliant and even great inspired artists. Because those who are really truly inspired, it's much more than technique. It's working with this, again, intuitive understanding, working with inspiration, working with divine feeling, or in the case of art, sometimes it's not divine feeling, it's more human emotion that's being expressed. So it's not just a matter of learning techniques. Too many yogis think it's just about doing techniques and then I'll become spiritual. And Yogananda, in the very introduction to this book, he tells the story, or I share the story of him from his autobiography of a yogi. And he was a teenager at that time. His name was Mukunda, before he became Yogananda. And he was meditating with a great saint, a great Kriya Yogi, disciple of this line of Kriya masters. And this young Mukunda would go and meditate with this saint who was called the levitating saint in that book. And they finished an hour or two of sitting in meditation. And the saint gently chided the young Yogananda, Mukunda, and he told him, he said, you often go into the silence, when we do this, but are you actually having anubhav, which is a Sanskrit word for having the direct perception of God? And he chided the young Mukunda, do not mistake the techniques for the goal. And so it's not just about doing techniques. It's about seeing the techniques and the tools of Kriya Yoga as tools to help us have the divine experience. And in order to do that, we also have to understand the art behind the science and how the art and the science work together. And in many ways, this entire book, there's a chapter on combining art and science in the book in terms of Kriya Yoga. But in many ways, the entire book weaves art and science throughout the book together because they are woven together. It's not learning technique in one place and then learning the art of it in another place. It's about learning, as I was saying in our previous talk, about how even during meditation and even while practicing techniques, including the Kriya technique, it's learning how to even offer up human emotions during meditation and combining it with the technique. And this is not something that's just intellectual or mechanical. It requires us to really work with intuitive feeling and intuitive awareness. And I share in the book a musician that I heard, practicing or performing music very beautifully. And you'll see this with great musicians. I know an Ananda friend who's a great cellist, and he's a master at that instrument. He teaches it, he plays in orchestras. And when he plays that instrument, you can see that his technique is flawless. And I imagine he still practices every day the finger exercises with that instrument. But the technique is so natural that it's become just a tool, a vehicle for him to be able to express divine feeling in the way that he plays the music. And so each song has a particular mood and feeling. And because he doesn't have to concentrate just on technique, this human feeling and inspiration just flows very naturally through his instrument. And so techniques help us to be able to channel, to feel, and to control and work with the divine feeling. And this is the combination of science and art, of technique and feeling. And you can see this, again, another musician, I heard them say that his music teacher used to tell him, he said, don't let bad technique get in the way of good music. And so technique is important also. And so really the whole path of Kriya Yoga is how you merge these two together and work with both of them together. And then the technique does not just become the whole point and purpose of it. We are working with technique, with art, with inspiration, all together as one. And I share a quote even from Einstein in the book, where Einstein himself, he said, just scientific knowledge alone will not get one to the inspiration of new theories in science. It also requires intuition. Yogananda, he described intuition as when the feelings of the heart, the human emotions, are calmed, and it's a way of perceiving from the heart. So it's more heart perception rather than mental brain perception. And this is how we work with an intuitive, feeling-based awareness and understanding. And when it's combined with technique, there's an extraordinary power. Yogananda, he said about Kriya Yoga, he said, Kriya Yoga plus devotion works like mathematics. It cannot fail. But it requires both of them together. Swami Kriyananda, near the end of his life, after practicing Kriya Yoga for some 60 years or more, he said, every Kriya I see now, every practice of the individual technique should be an act of devotional self-offering. And so this is a way of working with technique, but not just as a mechanical huffing and puffing of the lungs, but working with divine feeling and self-offering while doing the technique. And the technique, as we were talking earlier, gives us control over the life force. It helps us to calm the agitated emotions and really turn agitated feeling into divine, uplifted feeling. And that's the beauty of this whole approach to Kriya Yoga that Yogananda taught and that we share in this book, is that it's a whole approach to life, it's a whole way to life, and it doesn't separate technique and science from art, feeling, from devotional, spiritual, religious aspiration. It all works together. One way to look at how these things work together, I was in Assisi, Italy, and I was with some friends, some Ananda monks, and we were visiting the shrines of St. Francis of Assisi. And Yogananda, he loved St. Francis. He called him his patron saint. And he himself visited those places in Assisi. And we were visiting one of the holy places associated with the saint's life. And there were some of our young Ananda monks were there, and we were practicing meditation and tuning in inwardly at those sacred places. And a nun came up, and she was very curious about us. This was a Franciscan nun. And she was very open-minded. And she asked us, who are you? What are you people doing? Because she could see that we were out of the ordinary and that we were meditating at those places. We told her that we practice meditation and that we see meditation as a way of communing with the divine in that deep stillness and in that uplifted place of the heart when you get very still and you meditate. And she got very excited, and she said she was very eager. And one of our people just gave a very simple explanation. He said that, for example, if when you sit to pray and meditate, if you're all slouched over and slumped over, you'll just be low energy, your mind will be dull. And so the practice of yoga and meditation teaches us the technique, very simple, of sitting upright, shoulders back, chest out, with a very straight spine. Because when we do that, the energy rises more freely upwards. And this nun was so excited to hear that. She said, that's exactly what I tell my sister nuns. I tell them, you have to sit up straight when you pray, otherwise you're just going to fall asleep. And I see you falling asleep when you pray. Sit up straight. And so the science of Kriya is very practical. It's really very simple. It works with universal, realities that are true of all human beings. And sitting with a straight spine is one, but some get a little bit more deep than that, and maybe a little more esoteric than that, but also very practical. Same with the eyes, the gaze, looking upwards. When we sit and pray and meditate with that position, we feel more uplifted. The energy is rising. And so Kriya, science and art, this is the science of very simple human realities that are universal to everyone, and the art of using those tools, those techniques, those practices to turn our feeling energy up towards the divine, towards God, and as Yogananda shared in his autobiography, of helping us to have the direct perception and the direct experience of God in meditation in our own selves, with just in that very simple stillness and grace that comes when we get into these meditative states that are also uplifted, and working with, again, with feeling awareness, with mental awareness, and again, science and art, technique and devotional feeling.